Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fast Forward, a podcast from QSR Magazine where we talk to the founders, innovators, and entrepreneurs behind some of the world's most exciting fast casual restaurant concepts. My name is Sam Oches. I'm the editor of QSR and the editorial director of Food News Media. Today, I'm sharing a conversation with Kim Malek. She is the co-founder of Salt and Straw, an ice cream concept that was founded in Portland, Oregon, and is now expanding across the country. Now, I feel like I can't really talk about Kim Malek and Salt and Straw without first talking about Howard Schultz and Starbucks. Starbucks, of course, coming out in the 80s and 90s, becoming this big global iconic brand that it is, it took off by really establishing this third place mentality by saying that there's a place outside of the workplace and outside of the home for people to come and congregate and enjoy a cup of coffee. That third place mentality, that idea that a restaurant, a food service outlet could be the cornerstone of a neighborhood, has really obviously benefited Starbucks, but it's also started to take off in other companies as well. And one of those companies is Salt and Straw. But that really wasn't just because Kim Malek admired Starbucks. She actually got to work directly for Howard Schultz in the early days of Starbucks. Now, Kim, she started as a barista, but later worked in marketing and communications for Starbucks when they had just 30 locations. And she was with the company until they had about 3,000. So she saw this incredible rise to success that Starbucks went through, and she got to learn from Howard Schultz himself how he built this company around that third place mentality. She had a few other stops between then and Salt and Straw, but eventually she had this dream to open her own ice cream concept, which she did in Portland in 2011 with her cousin Tyler, who serves as really kind of the culinary master, the culinary mastermind of Salt and Straw. Howard Schultz is not actually the only food service titan that Kim has managed to learn under. She also has learned under Danny Meyer. Danny first became a kind of a mentor to Kim, but later became an investor through his Union Square Hospitality Group, and now sits on her board as well for Salt and Straw. At the time of this conversation, Kim and I actually met in New York City. We were both kind of passing through town and found this opportunity to get together and have this conversation. She says in the conversation, you'll hear that they are just West Coast, and she says they didn't have any plans for East Coast. But in between then and now, they have released their intentions to expand to the East Coast, and they will be opening in Miami next year. But at the moment, they are West Coast only in Seattle, in Portland, in San Francisco, LA, and San Diego, but with intentions to scale across the country. I really loved this conversation with Kim. We had a really great time talking about this. I mean, look, ice cream isn't really all that hard to talk about. I'm a big ice cream fan myself, and I think there's really something special that they're doing around this idea of having premium upscale, but also really wildly inventive and creative ice cream flavors, and then pairing that with this sort of community hub mentality and then scaling it across the country. So I'm really excited to share this conversation, which started out with Kim talking about her early career and how her experience at Starbucks eventually led her to opening Salt and Straw.
Yeah, I had a funny kind of entrance into the professional world. So I was going to school outside of Seattle and needed some extra cash for school. And so I got a part-time job at this little tiny coffee company called Starbucks Coffee. And I was a barista. And when I graduated from college, I was able to make a move into the corporate office. And so I started my career straight out of school working for Starbucks, which was a tiny company. At the time, there were 30 stores.
Wow.
And it was a pretty interesting opportunity to get to work directly with, Howard Schultz and a lot of the folks who were setting up the vision for the company. And, we hadn't gotten funding yet. And so everything was all just really in a startup mode when I began.
That's wild. I mean, so you knew Howard Schultz before he was Howard Schultz.
Yeah, I think his wife, Sherry, was still working double time to help make payroll for the company. And
wow.
They were out on the road show trying to get funding. And we were talking about, what it means to introduce a latte to the world. And
what was it about your experience at the shop being a barista that had appealed to them and they wanted to bring you into the corporate side of things?
Yeah, I can really remember being a barista at Starbucks. top brass sort of the company would come into the stores and meet with us. We would have these all-store meetings, and it was so inspiring for me as a 20-something-year-old to be hearing firsthand the strategy of the company and feeling so invested in from that perspective. So we really developed close relationships early on, and I being a Capricorn, in college had tons of different internships, and I think someone came to speak to our high school class and said, he was from the Miami Herald, and he said, what you should do to be successful is get a lot of internships in college. And so I busily went about, making sure that happened. And so by the time I graduated from college, I had I had a little bit of experience, and I think it was enough to sort of give me that leap into the corporate world at Starbucks. And I started working, I think, on the communications side and went into marketing and sort of grew my career from there.
And you were at Starbucks for several years, right?
Yeah, I was there. I left when there were 3,000 stores. So wow. I ended up working on the team that brought Starbucks to different cities, and had a lot of fun.
I can imagine. What did you learn from that? I mean, what do you pull from the experience of watching this behemoth company now grow from a little small company into what it is today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would really harken back to that story that I just told about that store meeting. That sort of intimate investment in training in the people was the foundation for growing the company. And having that experience early in my career changed the way that I think about businesses. Starbucks in the early days was the first company to offer health insurance, even to part-time employees. And I remember even as a barista, when the company went public, we had stock options. And so to me, it was all about investing in your people first. And I think Howard Behar at Starbucks termed the phrase, we're not in the coffee business serving people, we're in the people business serving coffee. And so that idea that companies or corporations can really be all about people was kind of branded on me really early in my career. And that's probably what I've taken forth more than anything.
Yeah. So what pulled you away from Starbucks? What got you to leave?
The .com era. I was like, I've got to be part of this. I can't miss this. Sounds amazing.
Right, yeah.
And so I leapt away to have a job at Yahoo.
Okay.
And that was kind of in the late 1999, and worked on their auctions platform. So just kind of learning about the whole e-commerce thing that was happening. And it was also, again, something new, creating something new, a new kind of business in the world that hadn't existed before.
Sure. And then you end up at Red. Was that immediately after Yahoo?
Yeah, I actually had another short stint back at Starbucks.
They pulled you back.
I couldn't leave.
Couldn't shake it.
But it wasn't as good out there as I thought it would be. Let me back in. And so I was at Starbucks for a while, and someone there, Don McKinnon, who had started Hear Music, which Starbucks ended up buying Hear Music, and he left Starbucks to work at Red for Bono. So they were starting a music service to help raise money for AIDS in Africa. And he asked me to join him. So I left the company to work with Don and join the Red team.
And with that, were you doing communications and marketing as well?
Yeah, so I was working on the marketing side, and we were working closely with Apple and a few other companies to get this new service going. And I think for me, it was just this dream of bringing my community, my passion for community, together with the business world. And so it was a pretty exciting opportunity for me, and I think a chance to really have that seed planted in me from, that idea of, how can you use a corporation for good in the world? And I think furthering those early days and that experience I had at Starbucks and then working at Red.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a dream of opening an ice cream shop. Is that right? So when did that start? How long have you had that dream?
Yeah, so while I was with Starbucks, I was stationed in Portland, Oregon for a little while.
Okay.
And anyone who's been to Portland, I think you would know that it's a very community-oriented city. I always say, there aren't a lot of big Fortune 500 companies there.
Right.
So we really have to rely on our kind of people come together and collaborate, and the community and the infrastructure is really built on a lot of entrepreneurism. And I was just moved by that sense of community when I was there and thought an ice cream shop would be a good way to reflect it. This was in 1996.
Okay, and so at the time, if we think about 1996, we're thinking about, I mean, Ben & Jerry's had been around. I don't think we had a whole lot of other premium ice cream shops that had sprung up at that point. Is that right? I mean, like, do you have an inspiration? Was there an ice cream shop model that had kind of inspired that?
You know, it's interesting. I wasn't really inspired by the idea of another ice cream shop. I was really more inspired. I think a lot of what I experienced at Starbucks is this third place gathering.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, that's what I wanted to create. I wanted to have a place where someone could run into their neighbors and just have a moment with their friends and family, meet people that they hadn't met before. So that's what it was about for me. And I had a sense for the creativity that ice cream could bring forward. But that really didn't come into full play until my cousin Tyler joined me when the company actually took flight.
You ended up cashing out your 401k in order to start this business. That's a big leap. I mean, that's a huge, huge risk. What was it that you felt comfortable with? I mean, you know, giving up everything that you have, this career that you have built, what got you to give all that up and pursue this business idea?
Yeah, it was the year 2000, and I had this business plan that I was shopping around, the height of the Great Recession. I thought for sure a bank would give me money to start an ice cream shop in Portland, right? Mm-hmm. That seems logical.
Sure, why not? Yeah. The epicenter of ice cream, right?
And then I did send it out to a few investors, not many, because I don't know that world very well, but I got a note back from one of them, and it had red ink written all over the business plan.
Oh.
And he wrote across the top, "You can't do this. Who do you think you are, Starbucks?"
Oh, no.
I later told Howard Schultz about that, and he said, "I wish you had sent it to me." So it's another story. But
you should frame that.
I threw it away. I think I may have burned it.
Okay.
I was so, in those early days, I just felt so nervous. I didn't want to have that sense of defeat, like, sink into my pores in any way.
Sure.
So I got rid of that as soon as possible. And I was sitting, I remember in my home office wondering what to do because I couldn't fund it. And I looked in my drawer for something and I saw this file that said 401k. Mm. Having spent my whole career at, Fortune 500 companies, I was like, I do have some money. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I took the leap. I knew with my whole heart that I wanted to create this ice cream shop, and I didn't think I didn't have any other path forward. So I knew I could go out and make more money if I needed to eventually. That wasn't going to be the end of me. So I cashed it in and started the company.
Let's talk about Tyler's role in the company too. Were you guys close growing up as cousins?
Well, he's a lot younger than me.
So no.
But we have a very close family in general. So
Got
we were
it.
always spending a lot of holidays and different family trips together. I think our dads, there's 6 brothers and sisters in their family, so it's a pretty big family.
Okay.
But so we saw each other a lot growing up, but I wouldn't say we were particularly close.
Was it a dream of his to open an ice cream shop or a business in general? Or?
So he, at the time that I was starting Salt and Straw, he was studying business in China.
Okay.
And he came home due to a death in the family and just started cooking to sort of help with the emotional angst that people were experiencing.
Sure.
And during that time, he felt like this is the role that cooking can have in people's life is what I want to do. He was so moved by that. And so he declared to the family that he was going to give up business school and go to culinary school instead, which, as you can imagine, everyone thought was a terrible idea.
Yes.
And at that moment, he heard kind of through the grapevine that I was going to do this ice cream shop, and he would not rest until I finally agreed to have him come to Portland. He moved to Portland with everything he owned in his Subaru and moved into my basement with an ice cream maker from the Goodwill. And we started the company that way.
Wow.
So his dream was really to start a career as a chef, and so our paths just serendipitously collided.
But that's so funny because, like, as a chef, I don't think ice cream is always maybe on the top of their list for how do you be culinary, use that culinary creativity and skill. So kudos to him for figuring out how to make that work. But I mean, did both of you the brand, did it just fall together? I mean, once you guys started working together, did this idea for sort of outside the box ice cream and all that, did it just sort of
I mean, I'd like to tell the story that he moved in with the Goodwill ice cream maker, but he recently won Forbes 30 Under 30 for changing the way America eats. So he's definitely realized that idea of being a chef through ice cream. And in the early days, I think so much of it was based and rooted in that idea of being a great neighborhood gathering place. And so I can remember Tyler, when he first moved to town, I said, maybe we should do a maple bacon ice cream. And he said, Denny's has that on the menu right now, and maybe that wouldn't be the right move for us. And he came home a few days later and he said, I've been getting to know the local breweries, and there's this one brown ale that's really mapley. And so maybe we do that, and we call Olympia Provisions, which is one of the top charcuterie houses in the country, and it happens to be here in Portland, and let's talk to them about how to candy bacon and what they would do. And it gave birth to this idea that's pretty central to our company now, which is local collaborations. And so often you'll see unexpected flavors from our company, so like a brown ale with bacon, but it's because we've met these two incredible companies and we're collaborating with them. And I mean, before I knew it, Tyler was in the back room at the brewery learning how to brew beer in cream. And it's just, I think it's so much the spirit of Portland that all these other companies would really take you in and help figure out, how to use their products in ice cream. Yeah. And it's like that old saying, like 1 + 1 = 11 at that point. And every single flavor on our menu has a story like that behind it.
That's so cool. So what was the time frame like between when you guys decided, all right, we're going to go in business together, Tyler's going to be the sort of culinary mastermind? I assume you just were you planning on being sort of the business person, the sort of head, sort of, I guess, face of the brand? Was that kind of your plan?
Yeah, I mean, I knew as I was working on this idea that I would need to find a partner who had some culinary chops.
Sure.
I didn't think it would be a guy in culinary school who doesn't know how to make ice cream, but our partnership has always been really seamless from that perspective, and I think it's just so amazing that I have this certain skill set and he's 180 degrees in the other direction, and yet in the morning we'll oftentimes come into work and say, I was just reading this, or I was thinking about this, and our ideas and our philosophies are really similar. So
sure.
It's been 8 years that we've been working together, and I can sincerely say it's been the most incredible experience of my life. We have a really good partnership.
Then what was the time frame from figuring that out and going to the opening of the first location, and how many hoops did you have to jump through to get there?
It was pretty quick. So we started, I would say that it was just a matter of months before we ended up with an ice cream push cart on Alberta Street, which is the Arts District in Portland. So we had a push cart on the Alberta Arts District, and during that time we were really learning how to make ice cream and getting to know our customers and kind of getting some of our rhythms down. And we started working on a brick and mortar store up the street. So that was probably not even quite a year from when he arrived and we started our business plan to when we opened that first store in August of 2011.
Wow. So Portland, of course, has this incredible street food scene. There are food carts all over, and it's of course, food truck is a different idea in Portland than it is in most cities. I imagine, did people just embrace this idea of this upscale ice cream in a food cart kind of thing? Did you guys have lines out the cart, so to speak?
Well, it was funny because the summer we opened was the wettest summer on record in Portland.
Oh, wow. Not ideal.
We're standing outside and there's this rain coming down sideways, and I think people felt sorry for us. But on the other hand, it was the most perfect way to get to know our customers on a really intimate basis. And you're right, people in Portland love to discover new things through food carts, and it's a pretty low barrier of entry. So you'll get people who are really innovative doing things that, maybe they couldn't take a chance and open a full-blown restaurant or whatever their concept might be. So it was a pretty cool way to learn and make mistakes and get to know people. And I would say that the people of Portland then also had this great sense of ownership over us as we went on to open a store, and you know, they were there from the beginning, really creating our brand.
That's great. Yeah, I was just thinking how, like, you know, talking about the brand partnerships that you guys had established with other Portland brands, and I mean, you know, and sort of this culinary creativity, all this, it's almost table stakes in Portland, right? I mean, that's kind of like what you guys do there, right? So to some degree, that almost makes it harder to impress the customers, but I mean, it sounds like it didn't take much convincing to show them how this could be a product that they could embrace.
I think you're right. Like when we opened, we knew we would be using the incredible Willamette Valley ingredients. That's the cost of entry in Portland. But I think this way that we collaborated with other artisans, so the Best Charcuterie House, Rogue Creamery with their blue cheese, Smith Tea as the tea maker, Stumptown Coffee, we sort of took it a step further. So not only the local sort of farmers, but also artisans. We've even worked with, like, the Oregon Symphony will come in and perform in our kitchen, and then we've turned the song that they were performing into an ice cream, or working with local immigrants to tell their story through ice cream. So it's beyond really an ingredient story and almost more of kind of food trends and social movements and other emerging artisans.
Sure. Ice cream, too, is sort of this great unifying thing, right?
Absolutely.
Mean, everybody loves ice cream.
And where else can you go in and say, like, we have a bone marrow smoked cherry ice cream, and you're like, I've never had bone marrow. Can I have a little sample of that?
Sure.
You can sample anything on the menu. So
yeah.
It breaks down, I think, some of the intimidating factors in the culinary world, because A, it's an ice cream, and B, I can have a little sample of anything I want. So
that wasn't scary? I mean, because when you, like, the blue cheese one in particular, I remember when I saw that, because I'm not a blue cheese guy, I'm just like, ugh. But obviously it must work. So did you have to educate people? I mean, did you have to get them over that hump?
Well, I mean, I will say we also have the best vanilla in the world,
good
and a
point.
Really good, you know, chocolate gooey brownie. So we try to make sure our menu is a mix of really approachable flavors, and then it also tells a story. So sure, and you can sample, like, people might always sample the new innovative flavors but come back to sea salt caramel. One other fun thing about our menu is it changes every single month. Mm-hmm. So people want to come in and try this new set of flavors that's usually telling a story. So like this last June, we did a menu that was based on camping. So we had an eggs and bacon and pancake flavor,
wow.
And we had like a mushroom Muddy Buddy flavor. We actually went into the wild with our team to forage ingredients for each of the flavors in different local cities. And then we head into July, where we have all berries. And throughout the months, every month, we kind of use ice cream as a platform to tell what's going on that month, whether it's seasonally or something happening out in the world. So I think that also adds to the kind of clamor of what's next, and I want to try it. And
right.
So it makes it more of an experience from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think ice cream when you think of like a profit margin on an ice cream or something. Like, you know, most ice cream makers are not exactly using super high quality ingredients.
That's right.
And it almost seems like you guys are going out of your way to make this harder for yourselves. Did you ever have a moment where you thought to yourself, like, maybe we don't have to push it so far? Do you feel like your customers like kind of expect you to do that now? No,
I'm really glad you picked up on that. We often say if there's a harder, more expensive way to do it, we will find it. I don't know if our investors always love that, but we, a perfect example, when we were operating in Portland and made the decision to jump to Los Angeles as our next market, we make great ice cream. We probably could have made more of it and just shipped it to LA, and they probably would have liked it quite a bit. But instead, we exported this idea of creating a brand new local menu there. We opened a kitchen, started from scratch with all new collaborations, and the people of Los Angeles seemed to respond really nicely to that.
Yeah.
And then we went ahead and did that in each of the other cities where we operate. So if you go to San Francisco or Seattle, they have a different menu than Portland or the other cities. And so it's really honoring that idea of going the extra mile and staying true to those values that we formed our company on as we grow. We didn't want to dumb that down or create sort of this mass thing that didn't stand for anything. And you're exactly right. It's harder. It's harder. Everything we do is harder, and we make everything in really tiny, small batches so that we can create all the ingredients that go into it and make sure that they're layered in perfect amounts so that every scoop has the right balance to it. And I think this all just adds up to what makes it a really unique experience.
Yeah.
And we sort of figured, like, why do it if we're not going to do something that's more... that's more. That leaves people
bigger,
with
go
more.
home,
Yeah.
right? But also, does that make hiring difficult? I mean, when you go into a new market, I imagine, do you have to have a chef on staff to be the one responsible for that?
Yeah. So Tyler, that's a fascinating topic. How do you scale this idea?
Yeah.
It doesn't scale very well. So Tyler and he has an R&D team, which I always say, like, you guys, your job is to make ice cream. We do these collaborations with local schools, and their minds explode when they hear that they have a whole department that comes up with ice cream flavors. But
right.
They work on a local basis to find flavors, and we call it story hunting. And Tyler and a couple people from his team do that. But they come into the market from Portland, so he just wants to really maintain control over our culinary voice, and he leads that himself. So we've been able to we almost think of it like a magazine that has, people, you go into different cities and research and get to know people and then come back and write the story, but the story is being written through ice cream.
Yeah, wow. So you and I are not unalike. That's what we do. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about growth. Obviously, you guys grew. So you launched in 2011, and here we are in 2019. You have 12 stores now?
19.
You're 19. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You guys are off and running. So you have 5 in Portland, right? Okay,
yes,
I got that right.
Exactly
Great.
right.
When did you get to number 2 and then start to fill out the market? And how long did it take before you went to Los Angeles for that second market?
Yeah, so that business plan I spoke about earlier in our conversation didn't have a location number 2. And in fact, I was commuting from Seattle to New York, and I wanted to start this company to stay home and be local. And a second location came available in Portland not even 6 months after we had opened our first. And you might remember we didn't have any money. So it was like, The second location was this corner spot that used to be an old coffee shop in Portland. And it was one of the first early day coffee shops that had like the windows that opened onto the street, and people were spilling out onto the sidewalk. And it was the epitome of a community gathering place. And over the years, it had fallen into disrepair, and it wasn't that anymore. And so when it was coming available, we just thought, I mean, this is it. This was our dream, and we think we could bring this back to a great community gathering place. And so all of our friends and family sort of cobbled together enough money to get that location open as our second location. It was probably a little more than a year after we had opened our first. One of my friends was joking, you can take the girl out of Starbucks, but you can't take Starbucks out of the girl. So I have 2 locations. And then about a year later, we opened a third, which was in my neighborhood. And it's sort of on this street that's like Culinary Row for Portland. A bunch of the city's best restaurants are on this street, and we wanted to be part of that,
cool.
To be part of the culinary scene. And so we had grown very, very organically in the early days.
Sure. And then going into a new market, I mean, was that intimidating? And what were you responding to? Was LA like asking for salt and straw, or did you just say to yourself one day, I must go to LA?
It was very intimidating. Yeah. So we had gotten to know Joan, who owns Jones on 3rd in Los Angeles, and they had asked us if they could serve our ice cream there. And Tyler and I thought, this is insane. We're barely keeping the lights on here, but we flew down to meet with them, and they almost felt like family. By the end of the meeting, we had agreed to sell our ice cream there. And we, again, were thinking we should do this right and make ice cream that's local for them with local ingredients. So that kind of gave us this kind of getting the wheels turning in the early days with flavors for Los Angeles. And as we were spending time down there, we got to know different chefs and we're kind of getting to know different neighborhoods. And I can remember one day we turned down Larchmont, and it was like, this is our people. It's this beautiful tree-lined street, and everyone's out walking. And sometimes, the stereotypes around Los Angeles are not that. But there's definitely streets that create that sense of place that is really important to us, and Larchmont was one of those. And so there was a tiny spot available for lease. I always say it's like going to look at puppies at the pound. You're like, I want to take that home. It's so cute. And so next thing we knew, we had signed a lease there, and there was a chorizo factory in downtown LA that was up for lease. And so we leased the kitchen and started making ice cream for the shop, and we were off and running. It really was not part of a master plan, but it was received with incredible, just a great welcoming, and went really well. So,
do you position yourself as a Portland ice cream brand? I mean, is that a winning marketing strategy in a place like LA, or how do you kind of come into a city and introduce yourself?
That's a great question. Portland is known for this great culinary scene, and like you said earlier, just a very innovative kind of artisan and collaboration. And so a lot of people had been to Portland. They'd tried our ice cream. They'd been there to eat on eating tours of Portland. And so when we opened in LA, we got a lot of great kind of a halo effects from that. But very quickly, I think through our local collaborations and the menu there, people took an ownership of it in Los Angeles. I remember not too long after we had opened there, someone put a message out on Twitter when they came to Portland. They're just like, oh, they have a Salt and Straw in Portland too, which our locals were not happy about. But so many people in LA don't even know that we have stores outside of LA. And I think that goes for cities up and down the West Coast. And it's not like we're trying to hide that we're from Portland, but we just want that ethos to shine through.
Right. We were talking before about this idea of like a chain restaurant, and how a lot of people in places like Portland, they have this anti-chain mentality. They're very sort of, loyal to their independent, local restaurant brands. As you grow, how do you sort of position yourself as not a chain, but a chain, so that you don't scare away anybody who thinks, oh, you're just a chain?
Yeah. I think growth can really get a bad name sometimes, and it doesn't have to be. Like, it doesn't have to mean that you're dumbing things down, or that, it's a race to the bottom line. I think growth can also mean that you're investing in innovative new systems and ways of doing business that wouldn't be possible if you weren't growing. And so that's what we are trying to do. I mean, we're trying to grow in a way that no one has before. So there's these local menus that we're working on. We're trying to invest in our people and in the industry in a new way that we think will help redefine what it means to have a career in the hospitality industry ultimately, if we do our jobs well. And I think also partnering with the community in new ways. So whether that's being able to hire with innovative programs with our prison systems, or working locally to offer training to at-risk youth. I think there's just so many ways that the hospitality industry is uniquely positioned to make a difference in our communities. So I think growth can mean something really different, and if you put your money where your mouth is, people will respond to that, but you got to prove it to them.
Right. So I just heard recently somebody, one of the higher-ups at WeWork, was sharing why they're actually getting into the food space they're launching this food incubator. But what he was talking about was the company's decision not to serve red meat at company functions. And he had this really interesting point, which was he believes corporations can change the world, and with decisions like this, right? I'm thinking about this the whole time we're talking, because you clearly have that kind of a vision, is how do you make this bigger company that has an impact at the, very much local level, and can influence the world in whatever way that you sort of seek to do so. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah.
And do you see that as being a part of the Salt and Straw mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only reason we started the company, was to create something different. And as we've grown, I can absolutely see the role that business can play. It can't be anymore that businesses, hope that governments and nonprofits figure this out, because we're going to be over here busily making as much money as we can. And those days are over. I think business has to be at the table with governments, with nonprofits, figuring out the issues that our society is facing and working hand in hand. I think a business can only exist as part of a strong community. And you've got to give back to and invest in that community for your business to be sustainable. And I just, I think we're seeing the remnants of that from time and time again in our country and in our world's history, that it doesn't play out well in the long run. So we want to be at the table in a meaningful way for our industry and for our communities and for our employees. And I couldn't be more excited about that part of our growth. That's what I'm most interested in.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the real big news that really put you guys on the map of most everybody in the restaurant world, certainly, was Danny Meyer and Union Square Hospitality Group decided to invest in Salt and Straw. Tell me about how that came to be. How did this deal get done, and what did that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, Danny Meyer wrote a book called Setting the Table.
Sure.
And in the early days of Salt and Straw, Casey Milligan was the first ever store manager that we had. And she brought this book into me and said, you should really read this book. And so we would all read the book and talk about it. And we found out that, he offers a training class in New York City for 3 days. And so we kind of cobbled together our money and flew out for the class. And we still use a lot of what we learned as the basis for the training that we offer our employees today. I think last year, every single employee went through over 40 hours of training in our company, and we take that really seriously. And so coming out of that training seminar, on the way out the door, someone from his company said, well, stay in touch if there's anything you need. And do not say that to me if you are not serious.
I would take that seriously.
We would call them from time to time for help with issues around supply chain or HR or negotiating, deals with sporting arenas. And you wouldn't believe they would put their top person on the phone and help us work through intricate details. And this went on for, I guess, probably 4 years. And so we really got to know each other. I mean, they would host us at their offices, and we would meet with different departments, and they were so generous. So when they launched their investment arm of their company, we were one of the first businesses that, had the opportunity to talk to them, because we had gotten to know each other so well over the years, and that sort of unfolded from there.
So obviously you have a financial investment as part of that, but there must be so much more that you can tap into now to help to grow. Like what can you do now? What is possible with this investment?
Well, I mean, first of all, Danny Meyer is on our board, which I still think I'm going to wake up any moment and say, you guys, I had the craziest dream.
That's right.
You're going to laugh when you hear this one. He's on our board. So we sit together quarterly, and he and his team are a phone call away to help with questions that come up. And for us, that's so much about, having someone with the same values that we do have a little bit of a peek around the corner of what's coming, and how those decisions were made at Shake Shack and what they learned, or, as we're grappling with different strategies, be they real estate or supply chain. We have access to so many people within their company to help review those matters with us and consult, and it's just, I could go on and on, but it's really been a wonderful addition in terms of helping us to determine our strategy, but also, how to work through growth and stay true to your values, and to have an investor of that caliber with shared values is so important.
For sure. And how did it accelerate growth? I mean, did you guys just want to step on the pedal from there, or did you kind of maintain the plan you had? I mean, did you even have a growth plan? Because it sounded like from 1 to 2, you didn't even plan that. But
I mean, it's interesting. I've talked to Danny a lot about quote unquote growth plans, because I secretly believe in the whole Zingerman's approach of, like, if you have more than one of something, it's no longer special. And it's like a dagger in my heart. I think it's why we've spent so much time making each step really, really special and investing more than probably seems logical. And, he said that he's had that same struggle. How do you grow and keep it special? And how do you allow growth to feed your culture and make it even better and stronger? So when they came on, we've been really fortunate to have investors that haven't put a lot of pressure on us to grow. A lot of what we've done is invest in our infrastructure to get ready for growth. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really what it's enabled us to do more than anything.
Sure. You really are committed to this third place mentality. Clearly, you got this from Starbucks. This is probably embedded in your DNA at this point.
I have no choice.
Yeah, now you're doing this through ice cream. How do you see the third place itself evolving? I mean, you and I are currently in New York City where people are just in and out of places and they're running around, and we have an on-the-go lifestyle. So how do you create a third place for that on-the-go lifestyle through something like ice cream?
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes even more important. We talk about at Salt and Straw the importance of having a moment of full face attention. And if you go into our stores, you'll see we staff them with many more people than you would think to find at an ice cream shop, because we want, even though it's really busy and there's long lines, and we want each person to have a moment to look someone in the eye and be seen and tell these amazing stories that we have behind each and every flavor. So for us, the idea of people, being on the go and being on their phone and being more isolated than they've ever been before, and really at odds with each other more than we ever have before, an ice cream shop, and our ice cream shop in particular, is a perfect spot for people to come together for that moment. I mean, we cannot believe how many times people get to the front of the line and they're like, I'm going to buy the guy behind me a scoop because I just met him in line and he's having a hard day, or he's just got to town, or it's so common, that sense of community that happens.
Yeah.
So there's that, which I think is really important. And then there's the flip side, which we were talking about earlier, that you can also order ice cream online to be delivered to your home. And so people do want to access our product in different ways, and we want to be able to offer that to them. And so we're kind of pushing the envelope in some of these new directions and making sure that we can meet people where they are.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because, I mean, you wouldn't think that, for example, third-party delivery would be a great fit for ice cream, but you guys are making it work. How do you keep up with a lot of sort of the evolving customer experience now today? Because I've talked to a lot of people who are not into the third-party delivery thing, because, I mean, some of that's because of how much, they take off each order, and, you lose a lot of the brand experience, but this is the nature of the beast. I mean, customers have expectations and convenience and technology. All that stuff is changing those expectations. So how do you keep up with that with the ice cream business?
Yeah.
And do you find that these trends toward technology and delivery and all that stuff, is it going to work well for Salt and Straw?
I mean, we're really excited about it. We're all about meeting our customers where they are, and I think it forces us to be more innovative about the customer experience so that we can maintain something that is worthy of the Salt and Straw experience delivered to your home or sent in the mail. It's all really new to us right now, but we're embracing it, and we want to be able to offer people ways to access our product beyond just the traditional, and people seem to want it. I mean, that business is growing. It's unbelievable how fast that's growing for us, and we embrace that. We don't, I'm not worried about the fee structure and things like that, because I think we can figure that out, and it's more important that we give our customers what they want. So we're really excited about it, and we have some pretty major innovation planned along those lines in the coming years.
What does the coming years look like then? So we could use some on the East Coast, some Salt and Straw, right? You're only on the West Coast now, and I imagine, New York has got to be a target for you, right? I mean, you do have some in some stores in the area, but a Salt and Straw shop, I'm sure, makes a lot of sense for New York. But, look, you can put an ice cream shop in any community in America and probably make it work. So what's your vision for how this is going to go?
Yeah, last October we opened in downtown Disneyland, which was major for us and major for Disney, too, because they really had to take a chance on a small brand opening in their sort of global platform, and they hadn't really done that before. So it was an exciting partnership for both of us, and we learned a lot, and it's going really, 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 really well.
Great.
So to us, that sort of, I guess it opens our eyes to new opportunities and maybe different ways to grow. So we haven't announced that we're opening on the East Coast at this point, but we're definitely looking for sort of those higher profile locations, and we're trying to figure out, I mean, for us, I've talked a lot about coming into new communities and creating a local menu. You can imagine the supply chain issues behind that are mind-numbing. I mean, it's really, really hard. So we didn't set up a business model that just scales really quickly and easily. So right now we're kind of working on that. We've been working with the Lean Institute out of Boston on our manufacturing and putting all of that in place to kind of lay that foundation so we can make decisions about, being able to take big steps, big growth steps.
Especially for the menu, I imagine you had to plan way out in advance before you enter somewhere. I mean, because Disneyland, you must have done Disney
very
flavors.
Specials.
So that takes a lot of planning on Tyler and his team. And so can you scale that too? I mean, community by community, you scale this sort of every different community gets every sort of different approach to the menu?
That's right. I think we can. I always say we invest a little more than seems logical, and our customers give us the same in response. So we are scaling that, and we think that we can continue to. But when you start to talk about huge jumps like over to New York and across to the East Coast, that's no joke. We take it really seriously, and so we're working really hard to figure that out before we make any big plans.
Yeah. All right, lightning round. What's your favorite flavor at Salt and Straw?
Strawberry honey balsamic with black pepper.
Oh, that sounds great. Black pepper, that's not like a normal ingredient I think people think of with ice cream, but it works.
Well, it's sort of a trick we stole from the Italians. So they would often put honey balsamic on their strawberries with a little black pepper. So it's rooted in some real culinary history.
Smart. Yeah. What is the weirdest thing that you guys have put on the menu?
The weirdest thing, well, there's one weird thing that didn't make it onto the menu, which was a crab Neapolitan.
Oh my gosh.
And the woman who was working with Tyler on it in R&D was secretly pregnant at the time and had to keep running out to her car because she was making her sick.
Oh no.
So that's always a good, barometer for maybe something you shouldn't put on the menu.
Right. Are you making your own employees sick? What do you think is the future of ice cream flavors?
The future of ice cream flavors, we, as we look to go more and more locally based, what gets us really excited are local social issues that we're facing. So we completed not too long ago a menu that was created with all food that was going to be put to waste. And, we waste 40% of our food in the United States, but our brothers and sisters in our neighborhoods around us are going hungry, and if we could put that food to use. So we made a menu out of all products that were going to go to waste. So we're working on several menus along those lines that I think kind of brings this community along with us on social issues.
Yeah. All right, last question for you, Kim, is what's your advice to entrepreneurs who want to get in this? I mean, when you think back to everything you've been through and sort of back when you had this dream to open an ice cream shop and then how it all came to be and all of that, for people who are at that moment in their life right now, what's your advice to them?
My favorite advice is always to not take advice.
Yeah.
I can remember as I was getting started, if I had followed even half the advice I got, I wouldn't be here today. And I think, knowing really well and having a very well-defined vision and staying true to that as you grow, even to this day, that's hard for us to stay true to that. And we have to look ourselves in the mirror and challenge ourselves to stay true to those values. And so in the early days, getting really clear about that before you start. And I would say as a female or as a woman, the other thing that's interesting about being an entrepreneur is putting your idea out into the world. It's harder than you would think. Men are typically much better at waking up in the morning and saying, I just had the most amazing idea and I have to go shout it from the rooftops because I know I'm going to be so successful.
Right.
And women on the other side will save their idea for 20 years and not tell a soul until they perfect it. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's probably a middle ground we can all get to, but as a woman in this kind of sector, I would encourage people to kind of take that leap a little bit earlier than you think you should.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, Kim, thank you so much for sitting down today. I really appreciate it.
It was so fun. Thanks. You.
That's my conversation with Kim Malek, the co-founder of Salt and Straw. As always, go to qsrmagazine.com for all the news and insights that you need on the QSR and fast casual restaurant industries. Go to qsrmagazine.com/podcast for the entire archive for Fast Forward. Also, of course, go subscribe on whatever service you're listening to this podcast right now. Rate it, leave some feedback. Email me, sam@qsrmagazine.com. Would love to hear what you think about the podcast and if you have any suggestions for future guests on the show. That's all for today. We'll talk to you again next time.